morning. So I called Dan this morning, and he was, I don't know, somewhere. And he said, I just have a little piece of advice for you. He said, Robyn, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Act like you're across the table from me or your friends, and don't cuss. And if you know me, one of the first freedoms I found was cussing. So I will be careful to not cuss. I will do my best. So I want to set the stage for this story. Cain and Abel, they were the sons of Adam and Eve. And I think if we use our imaginations, we can imagine that they grew up in a home where their parents were likely insecure. They likely had some struggles with God, with shame, with guilt, with some of those things, just because, they ate the apple, right? So they were being raised in kind of an environment, I imagine, that was a little bit filled with a certain amount of fear or misunderstanding of who God is. And that takes us to the story of Cain and Abel, which a lot of you will likely know. And I'm just going to read it. It's in Genesis 4. I didn't give that because I'm just going to kind of summarize it. So in the earliest days of humanity, two brothers were born to Adam and Eve. Cain, the firstborn, who became a farmer, and Abel, his younger brother, who became a shepherd. Both worked hard with their hands, Cain tilling the soil, Abel tending... Why am I not wearing my glasses? Cain tilling the soil, Abel tending flocks. In time, each brought an offering to God from their work. Abel brought the best of what he had, and Cain brought his offering too. But for reasons not fully explained, and I need to make that clear, the reasons were not fully explained. God looked with favor on Abel's gift, but did not accept Cain's in the same way. And I just want to put in there, I think we have tried to explain it. I think we have put words in there to try to explain why his wasn't received the same way. But the reasons weren't actually very clear at all. Maybe it was about the heart. Maybe it was about the offering. Maybe it was about a deeper story that we're not told. But we are told this. Cain burned with pain, anger, rejection, and shame. His offering wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. No one helped him understand why. And he looked to God for approval and for love, and he wasn't getting it. He didn't feel like he was getting it. But he did get a warning. God said, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. And in today's language, we might hear it this way. Your pain wants to speak in violence. Don't let it. Choose something else. But Cain didn't. The end of that story, he was overwhelmed by grief and comparison, and he lured his brother into the field and he murdered him. This isn't just a story about the first murder, it's a story about how unprocessed pain, jealousy, and shame can destroy your life. It's about how systems of worth and recognition, when left unexplained or unfair, can breed resentment. It's about how trauma moves through generations unless it's interrupted. So I'll tell you a little story about me and Dan. So we met later in life, second marriage for both of us, if you don't know. And I had butterflies, obviously, at the very beginning when we first started dating, and it was wonderful. Everything was great. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then as we got closer and closer, the butterflies turned into a pit in my stomach. I started to have fear. I started to feel like I needed to grow up and I needed to be real about what was happening. This isn't really as good as it seems, right? And so I found myself when we would be just talking, or he would be making jokes or jest or coarse jesting, or he would be getting ready to leave after we had hung out, and we had had a deep conversation, I would get angry, just like rage. And it would be over really nothing. Dan hadn't done anything wrong, although Dan does do things wrong. But in a lot of the cases, Dan hadn't really done anything wrong. But I was still feeling this anger that was deep inside of me. And I kind of understood that it wasn't Dan. I kind of understood that I had experienced abandonment. I had experienced heartbreak. I felt always that I was not enough. And so I think somewhere in there, I kind of knew this, right? I had started therapy, so I kind of knew this. And Dan had just simply bumped into a place that was sore. He had just kind of put a light on something. And not because he deliberately did, but because what he did caused that reaction in me. I also grew up, and many of you who grew up in the church grew up that there's a Bible verse in Ephesians 4:26. You can put that up, Roland, if you're there. That's the only one I'm going to need for my ADD brain. It says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sin go down on your anger." And the way that that was interpreted to me, or maybe the way that I interpreted it as I was reading it, is that anger was sin. So I learned early on in life through the actions of others or through survival that I shouldn't be angry, but there were loopholes. There were ways that I could be angry that people wouldn't know that I was angry, but there were still ways that I could be angry. And some of their disguises or costumes is silence, the kind that screams louder than words ever could, sarcasm, the sharp tongue that cuts more than it amuses, perfectionism. This was a big one for me, perfectionism, controlled as disguised order, making chaos inside. Tears, which Dan does not like tears if it's fake anger, or if it's anger, because he feels like it's control, which it is. People-pleasing, resentment wrapped in politeness, laughter, too loud, hiding a burn behind every joke, apathy, numbness when anger has nowhere to land, jealousy, envy, whispering, "Why not me?" Control, managing everything so nothing breaks, especially me. And I addressed my anger at different stages of my Robynness in all of these things. So anger had become my armor. The nature of anger is that anger is very accessible. It's familiar. We learn it from a very young age. Anger is accessible. It is an easy emotion to grab onto. It doesn't always look like an outburst because some of us are afraid of the outbursts, or some of us have experienced outbursts and so we control it. But anger is easy. It's one of the first things that we will go to when we're feeling something. And it's a shield for a deeper pain. It's an armor. And for me, it was the armor that I put on because I didn't want to sin, at the beginning. And so I was taught to suppress it or weaponize it, one of the two. But anger actually in real life is a flashlight. And the purpose of it is a tool to illuminate our inner wounds. Anger isn't a sin. Anger isn't the sin. It's what we do with it. And I'm not talking about, I'm not actually talking about the deep words or that kind of stuff. I'm more talking about how this word sin, where it talks about, Dan talks about this a lot, where it means missing the mark, or even if we take it a little bit further, it means losing our form. So what happens when we put the armor of anger on, or what was happening to me, was I was relying on it to protect my little girl, or whatever pain that I had been through, whatever triggers I had. I was using it to protect myself. And what slowly over time, the problem with armor is that it rusts. And we all know somebody, or we are somebody, who anger, the armor that we wore has made us very bitter, miserable people to be around, because we are so busy protecting ourselves that we put this on, but armor rusts. And so as time goes on, we begin to lose form, and then we get old, and we're done. We're weak. We don't really have anything left to give the world, because we have not practiced the art of looking inward, because we've only been focusing on the anger or the armor. So, let's see if I said everything I wanted to say. So we'll see humans walking around no longer having the energy, or they are simply a shell. They have lost their form and their identity because they became weak inside the armor. And then the armor rusted and became weak. And then they just simply became tired and lifeless without form. So rewind back to Dan and I. So this was very hard on our relationship. And I knew that I needed to do something different. I just didn't know necessarily what. Because I had graduated to recognizing my triggers. So I could go, oh, there's a trigger, but I wasn't healing from the triggers. I wasn't making a difference in my life. I was just feeling triggered, and then I was asking Dan to not step on the landmines. And that's no way for a partner to live or a friend to live. And it's no way for me to live, because really I'm not accomplishing anything. I'm just saying, yeah, there's a trigger. You need to watch out. And that's not fair at all to the people in our lives. So I had to learn through a lot of therapy and through a lot of Dan coaching, which I didn't necessarily appreciate, but through a lot of therapy, that I needed to pause. So I needed to pause in those moments. I needed to take the time to go inward, to look inside, and to say, why am I reacting to this? Like, what in me is there that's still holding me back, or is going to cause me to have this outburst? I'll tell you one story. I'm not proud of it, but one story. Dan and I were having a very serious discussion, but he had to leave. So he was like leaving me on a cliff. It was not fair. That was his fault. And we were having a very serious conversation, and he was getting ready to leave, and I didn't really feel like he had given me what I wanted, which was also part of my wound. And I jumped on his back and started hitting him. Yes, it's called abuse in some situations, but for us it wasn't, I think. I was so ashamed of it. I was so ashamed. I was like, please don't tell anybody I did this. Please, after the fact, please don't tell anybody I did this. Please don't tell your family. But I got physical, and I've never gotten physical, but I felt it so intensely. That would have been a moment for me to pause. I did not pause. And he shook me off, and he threw me onto the bed off of his back, and he walked out. And which was good, because I needed to pause. And that was one defining moment for me where I went, I don't know who this girl is, because I've always handled it in a different way. It was usually control, it was perfectionism, it was people-pleasing. But now I was handling it straight-up anger. And so I needed to learn to pause, and in those moments go, what is going on? And then to look inward. And looking inward is a hard thing to do for most of us. Or for some of us, it's easy, because we look inward and go, this is the trigger, and then we go, this is the trigger, so you need to stop it. But the idea of following the path to healing the trigger can be very hard for a lot of us. So I needed to look in. The anger was a warning to me that I needed to look in and find a name for it. I think it's important for us to not just say I have a trigger, but find the name for it. So rejection, I feel rejection. I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like you're going to abandon me. I feel like I'm a failure. I feel like you're leaving me behind. or one of the big ones for me is that I'm going to be made a fool of, that you're tricking me. Something is going to happen. You're pretending something so that I fall for it, and then something bad is going to happen, and I'm going to look like a fool. So I needed to learn how to name it and figure out what it was, and then that usually took me to the path of why I was feeling it from history. Because it wasn't really about Dan, it was about my history. It was about what I had felt throughout my life, what I had believed throughout my life. It was more about that, and it was less about Dan. Again, I say sometimes it is about Dan, and it is his fault, but... and I needed to recognize that the person in front of me is not truly the problem. It's the moment isn't the issue, the history is. And then I needed to take ownership. So I think this is part of it. Oftentimes, we still want it to be the other person's problem, and there's no healing in that. So I needed to take ownership. I needed to use statements about me. You said that, and it hit something inside of me. I felt something, and it didn't feel good. My daughter is raising my 4-year-old grandchild, and she is amazing. And she is a researcher, and she goes down a lot of rabbit holes. But one of the things that I think is going to be a service to Asa, and I think was a disservice to most of us, is that we were never actually taught how to self-regulate, how to name our emotions, and not use like, I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm whatever, but to go deeper and to figure out a little bit more. So it's more about what you're feeling in the bigger words, or maybe the words that will give more explanation to the people around you. So she'll say, he'll just go like this. He was with a bunch of kids the other day, and he came running up to his mommy. He goes, Mommy, my brain is telling me that I need to bite her. She's like, okay, I'm very glad you told me. And she said, why do you feel like you need to bite her? He was like, I just need quiet time. I just need my brain to have a minute. I just need some space. She's like, okay, this is good. So what do you need? What can you do outside of telling me, which was really great? What can you do to walk this out well? And he went and bit something else, like a pillow or something, and he took some quiet time and he redirected himself. But a lot of us aren't taught that. So and for him, he struggles with he doesn't struggle with he struggles with loud noises. He struggles when things never stop. He gets overwhelmed very easily. She's teaching him how to recognize that and then how to redirect himself. So we didn't have the luxury. A lot of us, when we were raised, we were told that anger is sin. We were told to shove it down. We were told to stop, keep our mouths shut, and leave it alone, right? And so that's what we did. And in naming it and learning how to name it, and in learning how to figure out, where did this come from? Like, what's the initial root? Where did this, my therapist does this with me all the time. She says, okay, let's take a journey back. Where did this start? Why are you feeling this way? It's not about Dan. It's not about your son. It's not about something else that's happening in your life. Let's take that off the table and let's go back. Let's find the origin. And I think that if we can learn to take the time to pause, be brave enough to name it, figure out what it is, be brave enough to go back and kind of look at it, then our next step is to retrain ourselves on the lie that's been told to us, or that we have believed, that we have told ourselves. It's not always what we've told, if somebody else has told us. Sometimes it's what we've told ourselves. And this is where, so this part, so some of us in this room have been in church, and church has done a lot of damage. And so certain songs, certain words that we say, certain actions will trigger us, will make us go, and then we put on the armor and we shut our ears and we stop there. Or I say God and you say, mm-mm. And I understand that because I'm on a journey back to saying, okay, I need help with this. And then go, why don't I want help from God? Or why am I angry at God? Or whatever. And usually it's because I believed a lie. I've believed a lie about him. Somebody taught me something that wasn't correct. And so I think when you get there, one of the important steps is to go to your creator, the higher power, God, inwards oftentimes, because we are Christ in us, is going inward and saying, okay, what is this? And what do I need to change? What do I need to stop believing? So, stuff with my childhood, my therapist will go, okay, so let's go back there. So what would you say to that little girl in that moment? If you weren't that little girl, what would you say to her? So sometimes it's us stopping for a minute, pausing, and then saying, what do we need to replace this with? Because as we do that, we begin the cycle of healing. We begin the cycle or the process of renewing our minds, another biblical thing, renewing our minds and getting to a place where the trigger becomes a little bit less sore and becomes less volatile. And it slowly, and I'm finding this out as I'm doing the new therapy, is that it's beginning to go like this, and my armor is kind of off most of the time. And the beautiful thing about that in our relationship, Dan and I specifically, is I'm happier. And I find more joy, and his jokes are funnier, and I really need his jokes to be funnier. His jokes are funnier, and he makes me smile and he makes me laugh, and I'm recognizing how certain things he did made me think, like naps. Okay, people, there's nothing wrong with naps. But in my past relationship, I had somebody who took a nap so that person didn't have to do anything. And so that was a trigger for me. Like if he said, I'm gonna go take a nap, I was like, you're doing what? And I would get so angry, and then he would wake up from his nap, and all hell would break loose. That is not a swear word. Hell is a word in the Bible. All hell would break loose. So he didn't really have a chance because he didn't actually know. He didn't know that was a thing for me. But sometimes it's simple little things that we have that are triggers. But the thing that I needed to learn was to heal them, recognize that Dan's not lazy, that he does work his butt off, and that this is something that he needs in order to stay healthy and in order for him to be the best Dan that he can be. So there's all these, that's a little example, but there's just examples throughout, I think, probably all our lives where we have a reaction it's not proportionate to what's happening. And we need to take the time to pause and to look into it and to go inwards. So that I guess would be, let me see, holy cow, y'all, we are gonna be out of here early. Dan was so scared I wasn't gonna be able to land the plane. He was like, just figure out what you wanna do to land the plane because time's gonna get away from you. But I could also be like Dan and take another 20 minutes to land the plane. So I needed to stop the trauma I needed to figure out the trauma that was in my life so that I wouldn't repeat it. Already my daughter is interrupting that generational habit, but I also needed to do that because now I'm a new mom to two other beautiful girls, and I am married to a man who I 100% am obsessed and adore. And I don't want to lose that because of past, because of history. So I challenge you this week to stop yourself when you're starting to feel that. And just look inwards and ask, like, why am I feeling this? Like, what's going on here? And then what do I need to do? What lie do I need to replace? What do I need to do to make this not about the person in front of me? And then if it's the kind of person you can do it with, then you enter into that conversation. Like, when you said that, this is how I responded. This is what I felt. Not that you can't say it, but this is why you're seeing me start to pull on my armor. And I don't want to do that. So I recognize it's not you, it's me, but this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to work through it. I think that so that's us as individuals. That's us to become healthier. That's you and me becoming healthier so that we can be in healthier relationships, we can be healthier with one another, but most importantly, we can be healthy. But as a community, if we read on in the story of Cain and Abel, God asked Cain, where's Abel? Obviously, he knew where Abel was, but he asked Cain, where's Abel? And Cain responded with this now famous defensive line, am I my brother's keeper? I believe this is a question that God is asking us today. It's a question that echoes throughout history. You'll see all through history this question, am I my brother's keeper? And what I believe that we can learn from this as a community is it means we must be people who notice the pain before it becomes violence, which I think we're on the verge, like already there, but notice the pain in the people around us before it becomes violence. A people who create systems of equity where everyone's offering and is received with dignity. I think that's really an important part. That's why we say what we say at the beginning. That's why we check ourselves to make sure that we are doing it, that it's happening. It's a regular checkup that we have. And it's why we say to people, if you're feeling as though you are not being received with dignity, come talk to us. And then we'll have that conversation. We must be people who answer Cain's question with a resounding yes. I am my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper, my sibling's keeper. We want to be a community that never lets anybody walk into the field like Abel did, that walks into the field alone. And as a community here, just specifically in the church and the people that watch online, we want to make sure in this time, but always, that we are aware of our people, that we're aware of them around us, and that we stop and we take notice, and we are their keepers. We do care. We care more than, how are you this morning? Oh, good. Thanks so much. As asking the intentional questions. So, where mercy doesn't erase justice, but heals what justice alone can't reach. So, I think it's an important thing for us to do as a community. I think it's an important thing for us to do alone. I am on a journey, which is why I shared this morning, of figuring this out and of trying to operate in healing and healing with my God stuff and healing with my just everyday relationship stuff. So I have nothing else to say. So they're not pretending I really am that good. It's okay. Sorry, that was just my inner dialogue. Okay, so, but first, let's pray, and in whatever form you want to, but I'm gonna speak words, and you can embrace them or not. So God, I thank you that you are good. I thank you that you are helping us to just change our understanding of who you are, but also change our understanding of how to be who you want, no, who the world needs us to be. And I pray that we'll open our minds and our hearts and our ears to things that maybe cause us to react in anger or just whatever form that anger takes, and putting that armor on. And instead, we take a moment to hear it and then take it in and look inwards. And pray that as we do that, we'll see a difference in our lives. We'll see ourselves becoming happier, becoming more accepting, becoming better people in the community, becoming a safer place for the people in our lives and for the people that we love. And I thank you that you're taking us on that journey. And I pray that each one of us will choose to enter into that journey in whatever capacity we're able to do. And we're going to see a church that's happy and full of joy and full of acceptance and zero shame and zero judgment, and speak words that bring only life and building one another up, but also building ourselves up. I thank you for this community. I thank you that this community has been part of the process of me healing, that they've been such a beautiful piece of me finding love and acceptance and safety, and making it a place where I can go inwards and I can say the words that are true, even in the lies. And I thank you that we will continue to be a community that grows so that we can do it for the next person who comes in, for the next one who walks through our doors or watches us online. And I thank you for Dan. And I pray that you'll keep him and Lainey safe and having fun and making big memories. And I thank you for the food that's out there, how yummy it's going to be. In Jesus' name, amen. That's all I got.